The opioid nightmare, a grim saga of public health gone wrong, took its grip in the mid-90s with the rise of OxyContin. Peddled by Purdue Pharma and stamped with FDA approval, this potent elixir heralded the first wave of fatal encounters with legal opioids. Yet, it still has snowballed into a haunting reality, with millions lost, and the looming specter of more lives on the brink. Purdue Pharma, the puppeteer behind OxyContin's grim dance, stands accused, charged with peddling deceitful promises, and masking the drug's addictive grip. Their machinations, a catalyst to the epidemic's lethal sprawl, stand accountable for a staggering body count. Legal skirmishes laid bare Purdue's artful courting of physicians, casting light on the dire need for reckoning, and an all-encompassing remedy to stem this tidal wave of opioid chaos. Purdue Pharma's star player in their sinister lineup? OxyContin, the opioid painkiller that unleashed hell in the United States. This devil's potion took center stage in the opioid catastrophe, drawing relentless firestorms of scrutiny and legal wrath. The maker of this malevolent elixir, Purdue Pharma, stood trial for their sins, criminal charges rained down like brimstone for their seductive marketing of this addictive beast. Guilty? Yeah, they owned up, facing a bill of roughly $8.3 billion in penalties. But that ain't all. The Sackler overlords, too, coughed up a paltry $225 million in civil fines. Their rap sheet ain't done. They pleaded guilty to greasing the palms of doctors and cozying up to an electronic health records company with shady cash. But that's just the tip of this iceberg. They stand accused of shaking down the healthcare system, violating the False Claims Act by arm-twisting doctors into dishing out opioids like candy, fueling a nation's descent into addiction hell. These legal whirlwinds and settlements? All shackled to Purdue's role in the opioid tempest, where OxyContin's dark shadow birthed a crisis steeped in greed, manipulation, and the ruthless pursuit of profit. OxyContin? A fancy name for the narcotic oxycodone hydrochloride, a potent painkiller strutting only with a doctor's nod in the States. It's the kind of heavy-duty remedy unleashed for the big leagues of agony, like cancer's relentless grip. This bad boy, filled with oxycodone, dances in the shadows of Schedule II, a controlled substance with a craving for trouble akin to its opioid cousins. Boxed warning? You bet. It comes with a red flag, screaming about its knack for abuse through the veins, up the nose, or down the hatch. But let's be real here. OxyContin ain't the standout player in the opioid league based on its charm alone. Nah, it was Purdue Pharma's sly marketing frenzy that made it the star, shoving it into the limelight and kickstarting this opioid circus. They painted it as a commercial triumph, but in reality? A public health catastrophe, a ticking time bomb of abuse and diversion. Sure, it ain't your run-of-the-mill drug. When over-promoted and over-prescribed, this wolf in sheep's clothing brings a different kind of danger to the yard, a peril that goes beyond what you'd expect from your average street stuff. The safety dance with the OG version of OxyContin, the first and original extended release called oxycodone, sparked more than a few safety alarms. Purdue Pharma's darling faced a major hitch. Its abuse and addiction potential were off the charts. The problem? You could easily crush or dissolve these pills, making it a cakewalk for folks to snort or shoot up, diving headfirst into addiction's cruel embrace. This recipe for disaster stoked the fires of abuse and overdose, fanning the flames of the opioid crisis. The FDA, playing the safety sheriff, kicked the original OxyContin to the curb in 2010. Purdue scrambled, rolling out a safer version aiming to slam the door on abuse. This revamped formula? A tough nut to crack, literally. No more powder party when crushed, it made abusing it a real buzzkill. But hold the applause. The unintended side effect? Enter heroin, stage left. With the new OxyContin playing hard to get, users jumped ship to heroin's embrace, birthing a fresh set of dangers. Studies show a tripled overdose rate after this new OxyContin strutted onto the scene. So while it aimed to put a leash on abuse, it unwittingly birthed a whole new set of risks, steering folks into the deadly arms of heroin. The OxyContin tale kicked off in '95, hailed as a game-changer for pain that cut deep. A lifeline for countless sufferers wrestling with agony. Yet, beneath its soothing touch lay a venomous hook. Sure, it eased the torment, but for many, it shackled them in a cycle of cravings and torment, withdrawal's cold grip, tightening between doses. That extended release mojo it boasted? A magnet for those with mischievous intent, luring them into a dance with demons. The fallout? A legion snared by OxyContin's charm, spiraling into withdrawal woes and an affair with opioid addiction. The aftermath? Catastrophic. The opioid crisis, stoked by OxyContin's widespread embrace and abuse, tore through public health like a wrecking ball. Overdoses piled up, and society reeled under the weight of this disaster. Purdue Pharma's aggressive hustle, pushing OxyContin like candy, came under the spotlight. Critics? They screamed foul play, pointing fingers at the company's greed trumping public well-being. The Sackler clan, lords of Purdue's realm, faced the heat too. Their reluctance to shoulder the blame? Loud whispers in the air. Despite the drug's golden success, they skirted the blame, failing to own up to their part in stoking this crisis. The public eye bore down, demanding they face the music, own their role, and right the wrongs wrought by OxyContin's havoc. The FDA threw down the gauntlet, axing the original OxyContin from the market, waving the red flag for one big reason: safety. Their verdict? This pill pack was a Pandora's box of trouble, flaunting a terrifying potential for abuse, addiction, and overdoses. It was the classic case of risks outweighing the rewards, prompting the FDA's decisive call to yank it off the shelves. Their move? It was a war cry in the battle against the opioid crisis, a loud and clear message about the perils lurking within opioid medications. They didn't just stop at the guillotine for OxyContin. The FDA got knee-deep, shaking up the safety game with labeling changes, guidance for healthcare bigwigs, and a serious sit-down with patients about the gut-wrenching risks tied to opioids. This wasn't just a regulatory tap on the wrist, it was a bold step in the name of public safety. The FDA's call to chop the original OxyContin sent a message loud and clear: patient safety trumps all, especially when dealing with these high-risk, addictive meds. The FDA's first take on OxyContin's abuse potential was like playing darts blindfolded. Critics took a sledgehammer to the assessment. Back in '95, the FDA gave Purdue Pharma the go-ahead for OxyContin, slapping it with the extended-release OxyContin label. But here's the rub: critics swear the FDA didn't swing the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act quite right on this one. That misfire allowed Purdue to hawk OxyContin for all sorts of daily aches and pains, from low back pain to fibromyalgia, even though those were precisely the kind of issues opioids were more likely to harm than heal. The FDA's stamp of approval on OxyContin was like ringing the dinner bell for the opioid crisis. Critics slammed the agency, accusing it of flunking opioid regulation and making boneheaded decisions that set the stage for this whole mess. Everyone started hollering at the FDA to hit the reset button on their opioid policies and dig deep into their rulebook to figure out where they messed up. To sum it up, the FDA's first gut feeling about OxyContin's abuse potential got a thorough lashing from the critics. They claimed the FDA's nods paved the golden road for the opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma, the Sackler's golden goose, etched its name deep in the opioid crisis saga. '96 marked the sinister debut of OxyContin, a drug peddled hard to docs with a sprinkle of deceit. They whispered sweet lies, brushing off its addictive bite. What followed? A tidal wave of overprescription and misuse, plunging lives into the abyss of addiction and overdose. Their target? Anyone battling chronic pain, even if cancer wasn't in the picture. Purdue spared no punches, fending off threats to OxyContin sales, turning a blind eye to the epidemic's tightening grip. The result? A crisis on steroids, fueled by Purdue's unrelenting sales pitch, despite glaring public glare. Their role in this opioid chaos? Painted in red ink across history's pages. The Sackler connection? A tale of public obsession and courtroom showdowns. Purdue's actions? A direct line to countless overdose deaths. In the cutthroat world of pharmaceuticals, the Sackler family was a breed apart. Picture a group of elite moguls, lurking in the shadows of the opioid empire. They weren't just any dynasty, they were the overlords behind Purdue Pharma, the maestros orchestrating the opioid saga. These Sacklers weren't your average household names. They were the invisible puppeteers, pulling strings from behind corporate curtains. With their fingers in the pie of Purdue Pharma, they directed the company's deceptive marketing strategies, raking in millions while the opioid crisis spiraled out of control. This wasn't just a family business, it was a dynasty, built on the backs of millions ensnared by addiction. Their wealth, power, and opulence were built on the suffering of those caught in the snare of opioids. The Sacklers? They're the swamp high rollers behind Purdue Pharma, the Big Pharma juggernaut that unleashed OxyContin onto the market back in '96. That one move, selling OxyContin, flipped the script. Suddenly, the Sacklers were in the big leagues, raking in cash like it was going out of style. But it's not all glitz and glamour. Their fortune, dripping with billions, ain't all that shiny. See? They've been sweating bullets under the spotlight of the opioid crisis. That same OxyContin they pushed? It's been called out for sparking a full-blown addiction nightmare across the nation. Now, they're knee-deep in lawsuits and shelling out billions in settlements. Sure, they've got their fingers in a lot of pies. Philanthropy? Yeah, they've sprinkled their name on prestigious institutions worldwide, from the Met and the Louvre to Harvard and the Guggenheim. But now, those donations are under the microscope too. The skeletons in their closet have got folks rethinking whether their dollars, tainted by the opioid crisis, are worth it for these institutions. So, the Sacklers? They're the poster child for both the glitz of high society and the shadowy lows of the opioid chaos. With lawsuits piling up and their philanthropic legacy on the line, these high rollers are feeling the heat. The Sacklers? They bankrolled a fortune, estimated at a staggering $13 billion back in 2016. But here's the kicker, they raked in that cash mostly from Purdue Pharma's sales of OxyContin, that infamous painkiller tied up in the opioid mayhem. Between 2008 and 2017, they were rolling in dough thanks to Purdue's profits. But, hey, here's where it gets dicey. Their fingers in the OxyContin pile landed them in hot water, criticism, lawsuits, you name it. They've been accused of fueling the whole opioid crisis in the States. Now, there's stacks of cash and big-ticket donations to places like the Met, Harvard, and the Louvre. Yeah, those are people raising eyebrows and asking tough questions. Those philanthropic gestures? Some institutions are giving them the cold shoulder. The fallout from the opioid mess has led to a whole reevaluation of what's ethical when it comes to taking money from folks connected to questionable or harmful stuff. The Sacklers might be sitting on mountains of cash, but the skeletons in their closet have put their name in the hot seat. The Sackler brothers? Brooklyn-born, from immigrant parents, all three ended up donning the white coats. Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond started off hustling in medical-related ads before diving headfirst into the pharmaceutical game. In '52, they snagged Purdue Frederick, a little patent medicine outfit, and that was the jumpstart to their big move into the drug scene. That was ground zero for what was to come in the pharma world. From there, they ramped things up, hustling to create Purdue Pharma. You've heard of their big hit, right? OxyContin, the painkiller that stirred up a storm, the heart of the whole opioid fiasco in the States. The Sackler gang made serious dough from Purdue Pharma, riding high on the sales of OxyContin. Arthur M. Sackler? That guy was like a dynamo in the pharmaceutical scene. He rolled up his sleeves in the 40s and turned the whole game upside down. Started off in a medical ad agency, and boy, did he flip the script on how pharma peddled its pills. Arthur shook things up with sales tactics that had Big Pharma executives scratching their heads, wondering why they hadn't thought of that before. He was the original smooth talker, making deals, and churning out strategies that made a pill look like the cure for everything, from a scratchy throat to a bad hair day. Librium? Valium? Those were his babies. He didn't just market them, he spun them into gold with his pioneering techniques. Some folks called his methods borderline shady, and let's just say blatantly deceptive wasn't off the mark. But the dude was influential. His tricks became the playbook for the pharma industry. His legacy? He made the pill pop culture's go-to quick fix. Arthur M. Sackler? He might not be everyone's favorite guy, but his impact on how pills are sold and marketed? That's etched in the pharma history books. Arthur M. Sackler wasn't just throwing darts in the dark, he had a bag full of tricks that shook up the pharmaceutical scene. His game plan? Let's dive in. 1. Detailing. Imagine slick-suited reps hitting up doctors, armed with samples, pamphlets, and smooth talk about drug benefits. It's a sales pitch, plain and simple, aimed at bending the doc's prescription pad their way. 2. Free samples. Who doesn't love freebies? Docs got 'em, patients got 'em. Handing out those little packets of pills? It's not just generosity, it's a strategy to get folks hooked on a particular brand. 3. Free symposia, flashy events, schmoozing with experts, and rubbing shoulders with the big names in the field. But let's not kid ourselves, it's an all-expenses paid sales pitch disguised as a knowledge-sharing gala. 4. Lucrative speaking fees. Picture this, docs cashing in for waxing poetic about meds. These speaking gigs aren't just about sharing wisdom, they're designed to sway the scribblers and nudge them towards prescribing certain drugs. Sure, these moves were the name of the game, but later they were under the microscope. With the opioid mess in full swing, folks were squinting hard at these tactics. Ethical alarms were ringing, and the regulatory crowds raising eyebrows about the sway these strategies held over prescriptions, patient care, and healthcare bills. In 1952, Mortimer and Raymond Sackler hitched their wagons to the pharmaceutical scene by snatching up a small-timer called Purdue Frederick. While Arthur, the big brother, was busy pioneering medical advertising, the duo took the reins at Purdue. But life's a hustle, and after Arthur kicked the bucket in '87, Mortimer and Raymond bought out a share, transforming the joint into Purdue Pharma. Fast forward to '96 when Purdue Pharma unleashed their golden goose, OxyContin, into the U.S. market. This prescription painkiller was meant to be a game-changer with its slow-release wizardry. But here's the kicker, the Sacklers, now in the driver's seat, pushed this stuff hard, and the aggressive marketing of OxyContin turned heads. Suddenly, their involvement in Purdue Pharma and their wild ride promoting and selling OxyContin became the talk of the town, especially when the opioid crisis hit the scene. public and legal scrutiny zeroed in on the Sackler's role in his pill-pushing saga. Mortimer Sackler was no small player in the world of big bucks and big moves. Born in the US but making his mark in the UK, Mortimer wasn't just some wealthy heir. He was a co-owner of Purdue Pharma, the company behind OxyContin, alongside his brother Raymond. The guy had some serious dollar signs twinkling around him. Forbes even pegged the Sacklers as the 19th wealthiest family in the whole United States back in 2016, sitting on a whopping $13 billion fortune. And guess where that bankroll came from? Yep, you got it right, the sale of OxyContin, Purdue Pharma's golden egg. Mortimer took a seat at the helm of Purdue Pharma Incorporated, co-chairing the ship from 1952 all the way to 2007. But here's where it gets interesting, the dude wasn't just about raking in cash. He had a soft side for giving too. Mortimer was all about philanthropy, dropping bundles of cash on various organizations and institutions. He even dipped his toes into the science pool, funding research and training institutes in developmental psychobiology at several universities across the pond. But hey, Mortimer wasn't all pharma and donations. He dabbled in the investment game, pulling off some impressive ventures across different sectors, making him quite the entrepreneurial mastermind. Richard Sackler, a name synonymous with Purdue Pharma's rise in the OxyContin saga, was more than just a passive spectator in the annals of the opioid empire. He wasn't just a partner, he was the maestro behind the scenes, orchestrating the symphony of OxyContin's ascension into the pharmaceutical pantheon. Sackler's fingerprints smeared the blueprint of OxyContin's inception. His silhouette loomed large in the boardrooms where decisions were made, where strategies were devised, and where the destiny of the drug was charted. Richard Sackler wasn't just a member of the dynasty that owned Purdue Pharma, he was the luminary who steered its course. His role wasn't confined to the shadows, it was a visible hand guiding Purdue Pharma's narrative. Sackler's fingerprints adorned the ambitious marketing campaigns that propagated OxyContin as a messiah for the masses, a harbinger of pain relief without peril. His presence dictated the creation of narratives that spun OxyContin as a savior, a beacon of hope for the pain-afflicted, disregarding the lurking shadows of addiction that would soon envelop countless lives. Sackler's relentless pursuit of Purdue Pharma's goals led to a marketing blitz that sought to paint OxyContin as a boon, a panacea for the nation's pain. His imprints adorned the quarters where influential medical minds were courted, where thoughts were molded, and where narratives were fashioned. Sackler's influence was ubiquitous, molding the perceptions of physicians and the public alike, painting OxyContin as a benign force in the world of pain management. However, behind this meticulously crafted facade, lay a darker truth. While Sackler may have envisioned a utopian narrative for OxyContin, reality painted a more tragic picture. The consequences of the drug's aggressive marketing and distribution strategy would unravel, laying bare the devastation wrought by Purdue Pharma's pursuits. Richard Sackler, the shadowy figure at the helm of Purdue Pharma's operations, would forever be etched into the narrative of OxyContin, his role a testament to the sophisticated dance between ambition, deception, and the tragic consequences that followed. Mortimer and Raymond Sackler, accompanied by Raymond's son Richard, dug deep into the opioid game, pushing the boundaries of marketing and sale of OxyContin in the States. Their pitch was a real doozy. OxyContin was painted as a game-changer, a slow-release gem straight out of the opium poppy fields, and with regulators giving it the nod of safety. They went full throttle with their sales spiel, targeting doctors, and using research that was, let's just say, a tad misleading. Under Mortimer and Raymond's steerage, Purdue peddled OxyContin as the answer to chronic pain. But here's the catch, this stuff, addictive as a game of poker, was hailed as safe when taken as directed. That's what they said, at least. Reality? It was an addictive whirlwind, causing a stir, even when used by the book. And to top it off, it was a breeze to abuse. The Sacklers were no strangers to hard sells, publishing studies that painted chronic pain as more prevalent than the common cold. They honed in on communities already down on their luck, where chronic pain was playing its symphony. This targeting? Well, let's just say it contributed to stoking the fires of the opioid crisis. These slick sales tactics and some smooth talk from top-notch docs managed to flip the script in the US medical scene. Suddenly, opioids were the good guys, a non-addictive, go-to fix for even the most mundane of aches. But here's the nasty plot twist, that shift. It got people hooked, real bad. They started with the pills, and then, when the itch just couldn't be scratched anymore, turned to heroin, basically a cousin of oxycodone, the core of OxyContin. Sackler wasn't just in the game, he was running the show when it came to pushing OxyContin across borders. His fingerprints were all over Purdue Pharma's global play, especially when it came to Germany. The guy didn't just want to sell the drug, he wanted to own the market, no questions asked. He wasn't content with the status quo, he wanted the rules rewritten. Sackler was relentless, pushing his crew hard to grease the wheels for OxyContin's deregulation in Germany. Emails, memos, whatever it took, he was on their backs like a bulldog on a bone, making sure every move was geared towards freeing up the drug status. This wasn't just a stroll in the park. Sackler was laser-focused on putting OxyContin on the map in Germany. His cohorts? They weren't shy about it either. They schemed about bending the rules, whispering in the ears of officials to tag OxyContin as an uncontrolled drug. They knew that ticket would pave the way for prescribers to hand it out like candy on Halloween, pumping up those sales figures, and making it rain in the company's coffers. It wasn't just about pushing pills, it was about rewriting the playbook. Sackler, the captain of the scheme, led the charge to make OxyContin a global sensation, a move that ended up becoming a driving force behind the storm of the opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma's push to deregulate OxyContin in Germany was like striking a match in a haystack. It set the stage for a blaze they couldn't control. Their scheme to deregulate? It worked. The German officials, under the sway of Purdue's slick tactics, loosened the reins, tagging OxyContin as an uncontrolled drug. And boy, did it set off fireworks. With the regulations relaxed, OxyContin flooded the German market like a tidal wave. Doctors, they got cozy with the idea of prescribing it for all sorts of pain, not just the severe, gut-wrenching stuff. The sales reps swooped in like hawks, whispering sweet nothings about the drug's effectiveness and leaving a trail of prescriptions behind. But the unintended consequences? Well, that's where the sweet story gets sour. What started as a dream for Purdue turned into a nightmare for many. People, hooked on OxyContin, found themselves on a roller coaster ride they never signed up for. Misuse soared, and some went looking for alternatives when the prescriptions dried up. That's when heroin came into the picture, whispering promises of relief, but delivering a world of hurt. Purdue Pharma's success in deregulating OxyContin in Germany? It was a Pyrrhic victory, feeding the flames of the opioid crisis. The consequences echoed far beyond the boardroom, leaving a trail of addiction, overdose, and devastation across the globe. Richard Sackler wasn't sitting idle during the OxyContin saga. No, he was right in the thick of it, steering the ship toward Profit Town, even if it meant taking some shady routes. His hands-on involvement in hyping up those high doses of OxyContin is clear as day from multiple sources. Court docs spilled the beans, pointing fingers at old Richard for egging on sales reps to push the highest OxyContin doses, all for that sweet moolah. They also hinted that the Sackler gang conveniently overlooked reports of OxyContin abuse, playing deaf and dumb to the drug's street hustle. Purdue Pharma had a sneaky playbook, a database of high-volume prescribers that was like a treasure map leading to their golden pot, OxyContin prescriptions. They weren't just playing checkers, they were playing chess with people's lives. This database? It was their crystal ball. It helped Purdue Pharma spot the heavy hitters, the doctors with a penchant for opioid prescriptions. They could pinpoint these high flyers down to a zip code, county, state, heck, they could paint a picture of opioid prescribers across the whole country. Armed with this intel, Purdue unleashed their sales hounds, dangling tantalizing deals and sweet incentives to those reps who could charm these top prescribers into writing OxyContin scripts. It was a playbook straight from the art of war, and it fueled a frenzy of overprescriptions. This strategy, slick as it was, didn't just move the needle, it was a catalyst for chaos. It stoked the fires of the opioid crisis, driving a spike in prescriptions that spiraled into misuse and addiction across the nation. Purdue Pharma, the wizard behind the curtain of the opioid epic, employed a shrewd strategy in their playbook, enlisting the support of influential figures in the medical realm, the so-called thought leaders. One such luminary was Russell Portnoy, MD, seated as chairman of the Department of Pain Medicine and Palliative Care at the Beth Israel Hospital in New York. Purdue and other pharmaceutical powerhouses doled out hefty paychecks to Portnoy and his department, strings attached. But he wasn't the lone star in this stage show. Purdue generously lined the pockets of several other physicians, employing them as mouthpieces for their opioid crusade. These payments weren't a mere handshake or a nod of appreciation, they were stacks of cash, hefty enough to sway opinions and influence narratives. Portnoy and his cadre of medical elites weren't just singing the praises of opioids from their ivory towers, they were singing tunes choreographed by Purdue Pharma's green-stained strings. These were not casual coffee chats or brief exchanges, these were lucrative contracts that painted a picture, carefully crafted by the pharmaceutical giants, to sell opioids as the silver bullet to end all pain. The stage was set, and the orchestra played to the tune of dollars, composing a symphony of skewed narratives advocating the safety of opioids. Purdue's strategy wasn't just about selling a product, it was a masterclass in manipulation and influence. By planting their banners in the camps of esteemed medical figures like Portnoy, they skillfully peddled the narrative that opioids were as harmless as a morning stroll. These pharmaceutical corporations weren't just selling medications, they were selling a perception, painting opioids in the rosiest hues, while turning a blind eye to the dark shadows of addiction and devastation trailing behind. And for these physicians, the allure of financial gain might have clouded the vision of potential hazards, transforming them into heralds of a narrative spun by Big Pharma's golden threads. Dr. Russell Portnoy, the big cheese in pain management, and a professor at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, had his hands in the Purdue Pharma cookie jar, championing the use of opioids for chronic pain. He was the hype man, waving the flag for opioid use, painting a rosy picture of pain relief. His clout significantly shaped how the medical crowd saw popping pills for pain, lighting the fuse for the rampant use of addictive painkillers in the U.S. Chronic pain, a thorn in the side of millions, became his rallying cry, and opioids were his battle gear. Portnoy was the driving force, convincing family doctors that their worries about patients getting hooked on these meds were mere figments of their imagination. He wasn't shy about his views. You'd catch him waxing lyrical about it in medical training videos and Purdue Pharma's sales pitches for OxyContin. That very OxyContin, the powerhouse opioid, skyrocketed into an epidemic that's left a trail of over 350,000 lives devastated over 2 decades. Now, Portnoy's stroll through the opioid fields has landed him in a whirlwind of public and legal scrutiny. He's singing a different tune these days, agreeing to spill the beans against Purdue Pharma and other drug bigwigs. Purdue Pharma orchestrated a carefully choreographed dance, one that painted OxyContin as an innocent lamb in the opioid landscape. They crafted a gospel that they diligently preached through their pharmaceutical foot soldiers across the nation. These representatives, armed not just with pamphlets and brochures, but with a narrative crafted by Purdue's cunning scriptwriters, were the conduits of a grand tale woven by the pharmaceutical giant. Their message was as straightforward as it was deceptive. OxyContin was a safe haven amidst the tempest of opioid concerns. Purdue's mandate to these representatives was crystal clear: endorse OxyContin as non-addictive, a miraculous solution to pain, primarily due to its slow-release magic. They were instructed to sell a narrative where addiction was not an inherent trait of the drug but was attributed to the patient's personality. Doctors were fed the story that only those possessing an addictive personality could succumb to the clutches of addiction. The pharmaceutical representatives, now the knights in Purdue's army, had their marching orders straight from the corporate headquarters. Armed with these carefully curated narratives, they infiltrated physicians' offices, armed with their persuasive pitches. The message they conveyed was as dangerous as it was convincing. OxyContin was a revolutionary painkiller with a superhero cape, impervious to the addictive forces that plagued other opioids. The serpent's hiss of addiction wasn't in the drug, it lurked in the patient's inherent traits, or so they claimed. This narrative wasn't just a whisper in the ears of a few, it was a symphony that echoed in countless medical offices across the nation. Purdue Pharma's calculated manipulation wasn't just about selling a product, it was about sowing seeds of deception, planting the notion that addiction wasn't in the pill, but in the person. The company's artful mastery of deception danced on the thin line between reality and a fabricated tale, steering the conversation away from the potential dangers, ultimately setting the stage for a tragedy that would engulf countless lives. Purdue Pharma didn't just dip its toes, it cannonballed straight into medical practices where chaos brewed. They were well aware of the rampant improper prescribing, misuse, and diversion of their opioids, yet they rolled out the red carpet anyway, even though it was leading to dire consequences, overdoses and deaths. Their playbook was as aggressive as it gets. They hounded doctors with incessant calls, showing up at their offices like it was going out of style, whining and dining them, and even throwing in some sweet perks, gifts, sponsored trips, you name it. On top of that, they funneled money into pain treatment groups that sang the praises of liberal opioid prescribing. Purdue's marketing tactics didn't just knock on the door, they barged right in, down to the nitty-gritty of tracking doctors' prescriptions, making hundreds of office visits, and coercing doctors to pledge allegiance to the drugs. From 2008 onwards, their sales reps made an astonishing 150,000 plus visits to push opioids onto doctors. They greased the wheels with cash, meals, and gifts for over 2,000 prescribers, locking and consulting deals worth a small fortune. Their aggressive hustle, rewarding prescribers with fat deals, kept the opioid train rolling. It's no surprise this behavior was flagged as a major player in the opioid crisis. Purdue's shenanigans are now sitting squarely in the hot seat of legal scrutiny and public outrage. In Purdue Pharma's operation, there existed a slippery realm known as the Physician Speaker Bureau. This covert enclave wasn't your run-of-the-mill gathering, it was Purdue's prized kingdom, a hidden chamber where dark deals and persuasive puppetry unfolded. Here, Purdue meticulously handpicked their champions, healthcare providers who could sway the tide of prescription penmanship. They trained these chosen ones in the art of verbal sorcery, instructing them to spin tales of therapeutic marvels and downplay the risks of their potent opioids, especially the notorious OxyContin. The Bureau wasn't just about educating, it was a realm of rewards and incentives, a breeding ground for the art of persuasion. These champions, fueled by Purdue's influence and lured by tempting perks, delivered talks and seminars to fellow healthcare professionals. Their mission? To cast a spell, to convince their peers that Purdue's opioids were the answer to pain relief prayers. But behind the glossy presentations and captivating speeches lurked the insidious intent to drive prescriptions. The Bureau, a hidden pillar in Purdue's empire, was a manipulative game, coaxing prescribers to dance to Purdue's tune, to wield their prescription pads in favor of Purdue's opioids. Purdue Pharma, they weren't just winging it when it came to getting doctors to dish out their opioid wonder drug. Nah, they dug deep, sniffing out prescribers like bloodhounds tracking a scent. They cooked up this intricate system, something straight out of a spy flick. They pulled in detailed data from pharmacies and clinical practices, dissecting every prescription filled across the country. Purdue wasn't just peeping through keyholes, they built detailed profiles on each doc in town, mapping out their prescribing habits, their preferences, their tendencies like they were crafting a criminal dossier. They weren't stopping at just a list of names and addresses. Nah, they went deeper, diving into the numbers, noting down every script, every refill, every opioid-related decision these docs made. It was like they were painting a portrait of the doc's prescribing habits, seeing every brushstroke, every pattern, every color. And why? Well, to influence these prescribers, of course. They wanted these docs to feel like OxyContin was the answer to all their problems, the silver bullet to their patients' pain. In a twisted symphony of persuasion, Purdue Pharma's Physician Speaker Bureau orchestrated its propaganda campaigns. Their sly maneuvers stretched near and far, organizing events across the country and beckoning healthcare groups and eager audiences. The Bureau didn't just sprinkle talks on the benefits of opioids for pain management. Oh no, they spun a web of intrigue around varied topics. From stress management to cancer treatment, even throwing in talks on climate change and global food security. It was like a snake oil salesman selling everything from the elixir of life to the secrets of the universe, all in the name of promoting their opioids. Purdue wasn't just tapping a few experts either. They went on a recruitment spree, enlisting physicians and professionals, roping them into this elaborate show. Thousands of doctors, hand-picked by Purdue, were trained and primed to serve as mouthpieces for their cause. These so-called speakers were like agents in disguise, embedded in hospital programs, delivering talks that masked the true dangers lurking within Purdue's opioid empire. Within the Purdue Pharma's executive echelons, a veil of deceit shrouded the truth about OxyContin's staggering potency. Dr. Richard Sackler and Michael Friedman, the harbingers of a chilling pact, chose the sinister path of concealment, obscuring a critical truth that could have altered the course of the opioid crisis. Their knowledge, a secret harbored since the ominous year of 1997, revealed a chilling reality. OxyContin's potency far outstripped the formidable might of morphine. Yet, this profound truth was buried deep within the labyrinth of corporate silence. In a calculated move, this pivotal information was deliberately withheld from the eyes of the medical fraternity, a calculated choice that sealed the fate of countless lives. This cloak of deceit cast a foreboding shadow upon the opioid crisis. Doctors, shielded from this pivotal truth, were misled into believing the false narrative that OxyContin was less prone to abuse and addiction, a fatal misconception that spurred rampant prescriptions and spiraling addiction rates. Richard Sackler didn't just dip his toes in the pond of profit, he took a cannonball dive into the deep end. His directives were clear as crystal, yet dark as the abyss.
Everything by selling. By selling, sell.
Sell. It wasn't about the patient's welfare or the Hippocratic Oath, it was about that bottom line. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. You see, the Sackler dynasty was not blind to the storm brewing around their prized product. They knew OxyContin was being abused, peddled on the streets, wrecking lives faster than a runaway train. Yet, they didn't sound the alarm, they didn't lift a finger to stop the pain. Instead, they turned a blind eye to reports flooding in, burying the truth deep within their corporate vaults. For the Sacklers, profit trumped ethics, and silence was their weapon against accountability. Their knowledge of the drug's dark side remained hidden, shielded behind closed doors, while lives unraveled on the streets. They were the puppeteers, pulling strings behind the scenes, weaving a tale where their profit margins mattered more than the suffering they caused. In a stark 2001 email exchange, Sackler showcased his cold-blooded disregard, labeling opioid addicts as victimizers. His words, akin to icy daggers, cut through the very heart of the opioid crisis, showcasing a chilling disregard for those ensnared by addiction's vicious grasp. This callous characterization revealed a soulless indifference to the suffering and torment of those trapped in the relentless cycle of opioid dependency, an unforgiving stance, revealing the chilling echoes of a man detached from the human toll of the epidemic. Purdue wasn't just playing chess, they were in a high-stakes poker game, and veterans were their ace in the hole. They honed in on these heroes, along with other vulnerable folks, unleashing a blitz of aggressive marketing and promotional tactics, all in pursuit of fattening their wallets with OxyContin profits. Their strategy wasn't just a shot in the dark, it was a calculated mission. They knew these groups, veterans, the elderly, and others who might not have been on the opioid train, were ripe targets. With precision, Purdue Pharma aimed their marketing firepower, bombarding these populations with messages that sang the praises of OxyContin, painting it as a panacea for pain, a magic elixir promising relief. But this wasn't just about making a sale, it was a game of profits over people. By tapping into these vulnerable groups, Purdue was raking in the dough while ignoring the grim consequences. Their aggressive tactics swayed vulnerable populations, feeding into the opioid crisis, leaving a trail of addiction and tragedy. These strategies, meticulously designed to amp up OxyContin sales, turned into a dark chapter, one that's been exposed and scrutinized in the harsh light of day. Purdue Pharma set its sights on the vulnerable and wise, the elderly. They spun their marketing web, aiming straight for this demographic, targeting them with a tailored campaign designed to coax them into the world of OxyContin. Their strategy was multifaceted and cunningly crafted. They employed a concept called titrating up, a sophisticated term disguising a methodical increase in opioid dosages. This method, veiled in medical terminology, became their go-to approach when dealing with elderly patients. By making it sound like a clinical process, they maneuvered their way into the realm of the elderly's health concerns, making OxyContin appear as the answer to their pain woes. Through a multifaceted campaign, Purdue weaved a narrative that portrayed OxyContin as the answer to relief. Their representatives tailored their pitches to doctors who catered to the elderly, emphasizing how OxyContin could elevate the quality of life for this demographic. They banked on the idea that the elderly, known for their physical discomforts, would see this drug as a lifeline. This focus on the elderly, with their unique healthcare needs and trust in their physicians, was a strategic move. Purdue Pharma wasn't merely selling a drug, they were selling a narrative, a story that positioned OxyContin as a reliable companion for the elderly, a path to a pain-free existence. But behind this narrative lay the harsh reality, a calculated effort to boost profits, manipulating vulnerabilities to perpetuate the rise of OxyContin prescriptions among the elderly and deepen the roots of the opioid crisis. In 2001, a federal prosecutor's report pierced the hazy fog of corporate complacency, revealing the chilling toll wrought by OxyContin within a single state. The stark declaration revealed a staggering tally of 59 lives, snuffed out by the merciless grip of this potent opioid. Amidst this haunting litany of tragedies, Richard Sackler, perched high in his ivory tower of corporate detachment, dispatched a message to his cohorts, casting a shadow of indifference over the harrowing human cost. His words, etched in cold callousness, offered a disconcerting evaluation of this heart-wrenching toll. This is not too bad. It could have been far worse. This glimpse into Sackler's psyche laid bare a chilling lack of empathy, a steely demeanor, immune to the anguish of shattered families and lost lives. His response, draped in a veneer of detached calculation, shockingly downplayed the gravity of the human wreckage of OxyContin's rapacious advance. It was an embodiment of corporate indifference, a brazen dismissal of human suffering, while the opioid crisis entrenched itself deeper, leaving countless lives ensnared in its unforgiving grip. From the shadows of 1997, a sealed deposition emerged in 2015, shedding a haunting light on the knowledge harbored by Purdue Pharma's upper echelons, including the likes of Dr. Richard Sackler and Michael Friedman. Deep within Purdue's quarters, these executives were privy to a chilling truth. OxyContin, their flagship creation, wielded a potency far surpassing that of morphine. A secret exchange between Friedman, the architect of sales and marketing, and Sackler, the maestro behind the scenes, unveiled a sinister pact. Friedman, the head honcho orchestrating Purdue's market dominion, confessed his reluctance to dispel the myths shrouding OxyContin's strength. His words, cloaked in veiled intent, echo the unsettling decision to cloak the drug's mighty potency in silence. It would be extremely dangerous to make physicians think the drug is stronger or equal to morphine. I do not plan to do anything about that. Richard Sackler, the custodian of Purdue's nefarious designs, nodded in accord. Their mutual understanding sealed the fate of doctors left unaware, shackled by the deceptive guise that OxyContin, their marvel, was a lesser force than morphine. Despite their knowing glances, they chose a treacherous path, withholding vital truths about OxyContin's formidable might, hoisting the banner of deception high above ethical grounds. These revelations, like specters rising from the depths, cast a damning pall over Purdue Pharma and the Sackler dynasty, embroiling them in legal skirmishes and public condemnation. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, Purdue Pharma received numerous reports indicating the misuse, addiction, and overdose deaths associated with OxyContin. Despite these reports, Purdue continued aggressive marketing campaigns, emphasizing the drug's safety and downplaying the risks of addiction. The company maintained that OxyContin was less prone to abuse compared to other opioids due to its time-release formulation, even though evidence suggested otherwise. Sales representatives incentivized doctors to prescribe higher doses of OxyContin, contributing to increased addiction and abuse. Reports surfaced indicating Purdue's knowledge of the drug's potency compared to morphine, which the company chose not to disclose to doctors. Federal prosecutors and regulatory agencies started investigating Purdue Pharma's marketing practices and its role in the opioid crisis. Legal actions and lawsuits began mounting against Purdue Pharma, accusing the company of fueling the opioid epidemic through deceptive marketing tactics. The company faced increasing public and legal scrutiny, with allegations of prioritizing profits over public health. Subsequently, Purdue Pharma became embroiled in extensive legal battles, facing numerous lawsuits from states, counties, and individuals affected by the opioid crisis. Amid the simmering chaos of investigations, the legal battlefield bristled with intensity as evidence piled high against Purdue Pharma. The revelations unleashed a floodgate of lawsuits, each accusing the pharmaceutical juggernaut of orchestrating a grand charade, concealing sordid secrets veiled behind OxyContin's glossy facade. Dates blurred, merging into a timeline littered with legal salvos. 2019, lawsuits sprouted across the nation, like untamed weeds in a neglected garden. Purdue Pharma found itself ensnared in a maze of legal challenges, accused of willful blindness to OxyContin's dangers. The lawsuits contended that Purdue Pharma possessed intimate knowledge of the drug's addictive potential but chose the treacherous path of silence, letting the deadly ripples of the opioid crisis propagate across communities. In the courts, accusatory fingers pointed toward Purdue Pharma's boardrooms, highlighting a corporate culture steeped in deception. The accusations painted a grim picture of a company knowingly pushing a hazardous product, underplaying its perils, and stoking the fires of an epidemic that scorched countless lives. Lawsuits cascaded in a deluge against Purdue Pharma. They echoed with the collective anger of individuals, families, states, and municipalities seeking retribution for lives lost, families shattered, and communities ravaged. These legal battles, like thundering titans, charged forth with the weight of evidence that aimed to expose Purdue Pharma's alleged manipulations and cast them into the unforgiving spotlight of justice. The legal battleground was alive with fervor, brimming with legal teams wielding evidence like sharp swords, poised to pierce through the shroud of corporate deception. Purdue Pharma found itself engulfed in a relentless storm of litigation, each lawsuit seeking restitution for the toll the opioid crisis had exacted on society. The mounting legal challenges cast a shadow over Purdue Pharma, forcing it to confront the grim reality of its alleged role in the opioid epidemic. In the mid-2000s, the legal battlefield became a blood-soaked canvas awash with lawsuits aimed like arrows at the heart of Purdue Pharma. These legal missiles weren't ordinary. They carried the weight of a nation reeling from an opioid tempest. Each lawsuit was a thunderclap, an accusation charging Purdue with deceptive maneuvers that wove a tapestry of addiction and despair. Amid this legal maelstrom, Purdue's fortress of denial stood tall, unshaken by the volley of litigious arrows. The accusations hurled at the company alleged a calculated dance with deception, accusing Purdue of playing down the voracious appetite of OxyContin for human lives. But Purdue's stance wasn't one of remorse or acknowledgement. It was a boulder lodged in the path of legal retribution, unmoved by the fury of allegations. The courtroom became an arena where the clash between public outrage and Purdue's adamant denial reverberated. The lawsuits, like a tempest gathering fury, accused the pharmaceutical giant of orchestrating a symphony of deceit through misleading marketing tactics, minimizing the very chains of addiction they had forged. Yet, Purdue's response remained as unyielding as a fortress gate, shut tight against any admission of culpability or guilt. The mid-2000s etched a chapter in legal history, painting a stark contrast between a nation's outcry and Purdue's steadfast rebuttal. It was a tale of legal skirmishes against a Goliath of dismissal, as the lawsuits continued to surge like a relentless tide, heralding a protracted struggle between justice and obstinate indifference. In the late 2000s, the legal storm surrounding Purdue Pharma gathered hurricane force, slamming the company with an onslaught of legal blows. Lawsuits hammered down like relentless thunderbolts, each carrying the weight of a nation grappling with the consequences of an opioid disaster. These legal tempests accused Purdue of wielding OxyContin as a weapon, igniting a firestorm of addiction and despair across the land. Under this legal siege, Purdue began to feel the scalding heat of public outrage. They faced an increasing barrage of legal actions that shook their foundation, forcing the company into the perilous terrain of settlements and regulatory crosshairs. The company, once a titan in pharmaceutical circles, found itself backed into a corner, threatened by a storm surge of litigations and governmental scrutiny. As the legal news tightened, Purdue, recognizing the gathering storm clouds, started to pivot. The winds of change began to whisper through the halls of Purdue Pharma, prompting alterations in their once aggressive marketing practices. The company, notorious for its aggressive promotional tactics, embarked on a reluctant shift, gradually issuing warnings, signaling a half-hearted acknowledgement of the lethal potency simmering within their opioid flagship, OxyContin. In 2019, Purdue Pharma found itself cornered, a wounded giant staggering under the weight of over 2,000 legal adversaries, each bearing the scars of the opioid epidemic. The company, hounded by the relentless onslaught of lawsuits akin to an army marching against its gates, eventually raised the white flag of bankruptcy, a gesture of surrender in the face of insurmountable legal tides. With the battle lines drawn in courtrooms across the nation, Purdue Pharma, a once mighty pharmaceutical behemoth, laid out a settlement plan as a desperate gambit to quell the tidal wave of litigations. The company, in an attempt to staunch the bleeding, proposed to pay out billions of dollars, a begrudging acknowledgement of the role its opioid product played in the widespread crisis that had ravaged communities nationwide. Purdue got tangled in a web of legal woes with some serious allegations. 1. Double trouble conspiracy. They copped a plea for conspiring to defraud Uncle Sam and violating the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Purdue was caught messing with the DEA, twisting info, and pulling strings to beef up their opioid sales. Ain't that a punch in the gut for lawful business dealings? 2. Kickback collision. They weren't innocent of slipping cash to doctors through their speaker program. It was a slick play aimed at greasing the prescription wheels, spinning those scripts like vinyl records at a jam-packed party. 3. Cash splashback. Purdue's reckless games cost them big time, with a criminal fine smashing the $3 billion mark and another hefty $2 billion thrown in for good measure. A financial slapdown that echoed across the pharmaceutical landscape. These charges painted a grim picture of Purdue's shadowy maneuvers, playing fast and loose with the law, and greasing palms to peddle their opioid wares, ultimately adding fuel to the already raging opioid inferno. In the stormy sea of legal turmoil, 2020 unveiled a watershed moment for Purdue Pharma. The company's tune changed as they faced the music of federal charges. With a guilty plea echoing through the halls of justice, Purdue Pharma admitted their involvement in orchestrating an operation of deception. Their songbook included a federal conspiracy charge, an ominous melody of defrauding the nation. Anti-kickback laws were trampled upon, staining the once respected halls of a pharmaceutical powerhouse. It was an admission etched in the Journal of Corporate Culpability, marking an essential shift in the fight against the opioid scourge. The Sackler family, those bigwigs holding the purse strings at Purdue Pharma, weren't about to let their wealth or their rep take a hit from the whole opioid crisis debacle. They were all about protecting their fortunes and reputations. Here's how they played it. 1. Steering clear of the limelight. These folks knew the art of dodging the press like the back of their hand. No interviews, no public statements, nada. They wanted to keep their names out of the headlines, avoiding the glare of public scrutiny. 2. Boardroom bonuses. On the down low, they slyly slid sweet bonuses into their pockets as Purdue Pharma's board members. While the lawsuits piled up, they were busy making sure their bank accounts kept swelling. Money talks, and these cats weren't about to let the cash flow stop. 3. Legal cover-ups. They weren't just sitting pretty. Nah, they hired the slickest legal guns in the game to safeguard their interests. The best legal muscle money could buy was standing guard, ensuring their financial fortress remained intact against the legal onslaught. 4. Asset shuffle. The Sacklers shuffled their assets like a deck of cards. They moved their dough around, tucking it away in safe havens, making sure their cash reserves were shielded from any fallout from Purdue Pharma's mess. 5. Global resolutions. When push came to shove, they went global, cutting deals left and right to put an end to the legal chaos. They huddled up with the Department of Justice, coughing up a hefty $8.3 billion in penalties, a move to make their problems disappear, or at least buy some peace and quiet. The Sacklers? Masters of dodging the storm, both financially and publicly, while their company's opioid mess rumbled on. As the legal heat turned up on Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family hustled to keep their hands clean, cash-wise and publicity-wise. They steered clear of interviews and made sure the board members from the family lined their pockets with fat bonuses. The lawsuits slapped against Purdue Pharma spotlighted the public uproar and finger-pointing at the company for causing the opioid mayhem and hustling their meds. Come 2020, Purdue Pharma finally faced the music, striking a deal with the U.S. Department of Justice to put an end to the legal wrangling. The company and the Sacklers took a guilty plea for a trio of federal charges, owning up to scamming Uncle Sam and breaking the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act with their sketchy opioid marketing. The price tag for their sins? A whopping $8.3 billion in penalties and forfeitures. It's like they paid a fortune just to say, oops, our bad. In the legal ring, Purdue Pharma's been dancing a slick tango to keep its files under lock and key. In Kentucky, a court gave the nod to crack open the vault on Purdue's OxyContin marketing records back in 2016. But Purdue wasn't ready to spill the beans just yet. They went toe-to-toe, threw an appeal, and managed to freeze the court order faster than a brain freeze on a hot day. Fast forward to 2018, another ruling hit the floor, demanding those records take center stage. But Purdue? Oh, they're not ones to bow down easily. They snapped back, gunning for a fresh hearing or even a royal showdown at the Kentucky Supreme Court. With a poker face, Purdue played their hand, claiming those files weren't even in the game and shouldn't hit the public limelight. They argued their own set of rules, citing Kentucky laws and waving the protective order banner like it's the Holy Grail. But the appeals court wasn't buying it. They sent a clear message, reminding Purdue that when it's about the public's interest, those curtains don't stay closed forever. This saga shines a spotlight on Purdue Pharma's tireless efforts to keep their documents wrapped up in secrecy, using every legal loophole to keep their backstage stories hidden from the prying eyes of the public. The Sackler family's financial escapades were straight out of a mystery novel. A report commissioned by Purdue Pharma spilled the beans on how the Sacklers whisked a jaw-dropping $10.7 billion out of Purdue Pharma. But here's the twist. They shuffled this treasure through a maze of trusts and companies scattered across the globe, turning their financial playground into a labyrinth that's harder to crack than a secret code. These financial gymnastics didn't just make it tough to figure out their real worth, it made their moves hard to track. By splashing their cash into these trusts and companies worldwide, they muddied the waters, making it tricky to grasp the full scope of their wealth and dealings. Now, here's where it gets dicey. These financial riddles aren't just a puzzle for nosy investigators. Nah, they've got the attention of the legal sharks circling Purdue Pharma's bankruptcy and the settlement talks. Why? Because these shell games raise a lot of eyebrows. Some folks reckon the Sacklers ain't putting enough skin in the game to fix the mess their opioids made. They're accused of trying to duck their financial responsibilities and hide their questionable money moves. These financial acrobatics have thrown a spotlight on the Sacklers' secret financial universe, triggering a mad dash by investigators and reporters to unravel the whole shebang. It's a tangled web of wealth and shady dealings that's become the cornerstone of the legal and public heat on the Sacklers and the opioid crisis. The Sacklers and their Purdue Pharma saga? It's been a roller coaster ride of deception, greed, and division. These cats thought they could outsmart the world, but hey, the truth always catches up. From the get-go, they danced with OxyContin, selling dreams while hiding nightmares. Their slick marketing campaigns pushed pills like candy, all while ignoring the havoc they were wreaking on lives. They hustled hard to bury their names in the deepest corners, hoping the spotlight wouldn't find them. But the truth has a way of kicking down doors, and when it did, it exposed their every move, the secret cash stashes, the dodgy deals, the whole shebang. They tried to sugarcoat their legacy with charity gigs, but the stains of the opioid crisis were too deep. No amount of philanthropy could wash that away. Finally, when the gavel dropped, Purdue Pharma faced the music, and the Sacklers. Well, they had to cough up some serious dough. The billions they offered as restitution? Just a drop in the ocean of pain their actions caused. The story of the Sacklers and Purdue is a tale of greed, manipulation, and the harsh reality that money can't buy absolution. They thought they could game the system, but in the end, they were just playing with fire, and they got burned.